me, the Honorable Reverend Anna Duke. Ladies, gents, and other, because we all know the secret third gender is other. Today I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tear. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some, actual factual facts on this particular subject and a couple of articles regarding that. And then I'm going to go off on a fucking rant. So, first things first, what I'm going to be talking about today is the quote-unquote male loneliness epidemic. Now, the reason why it's called the male loneliness epidemic is because these absolute jagaloons are real fucking loud about it, but the thing is that what it actually is a loneliness epidemic. Overall, people are lonelier. I'm seeing statistics at 16% for men and 15% for women. Why we're not polling for other, I don't know, but that's the numbers that I have seen. So, first things first, it's a bunch of internet piss baby, crybaby losers with just no actual respect for themselves or anyone else around them, centering this particular issue around men, because of course they are. But it actually is just an issue overall. Really it ties into how modern society functions. A lot of it has to do with social media. Now, I know a lot of people say, social media bad, but yeah, it is. I mean, it's not bad in the way that some people try to make it out to be, but it has its issues. We'll start with the, what was it called? It was the something validation feedback loop. Essentially, social media and with the likes and the clicks and all that, that's all designed to stimulate dopamine production, which in turn can cause many individuals, especially those with a dopamine deficiency or issues with producing dopamine, can cause them to become addicted to it. Now, that's not something I feel like digging up to find. Google is free. I understand that the AI for Google is making it suck. The enshittification of the internet is a real thing. But, I don't go to Google Scholar. I don't know what to fucking tell you. And if you don't know how to read that shit, I can translate for you. I speak educated. But we're gonna start with this. Wikipedia is a good source for just general explanation. There is no male loneliness epidemic, it's just the loneliness epidemic. So I'm gonna read it verbatim from Wikipedia. The loneliness epidemic is an ongoing trend of loneliness and social isolation experienced by people across the globe. So therefore, not just men and not just the United States. The increase may have begun in the 2010s and was exacerbated by the isolating effects of social distancing, stay-at-home orders, and deaths during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still going on. We are still in a pandemic. It's just, we're the ones having the worst time of it, from my understanding. Anyway, other factors credited for the increase include individualism, technology, social media, economic inequality, lack of social support, and lack of a college degree. All of those things could be solved with my political agenda, but I'm not getting into that today. So the history of the study of loneliness. The concept of a quote-unquote loneliness epidemic began to gain attention before the COVID-19 pandemic, with researchers pointing to rising rates of social isolation in the 2000s. I can say that for certain. As somebody who was an older teenager in the early 2000s, yeah, bruh. We hadn't had any hardcore social media yet, but with the internet, we began to isolate ourselves a little bit more. I isolated a little bit. I was way more social when I was younger, but still, I was still a way bit of a loner. Robert D. Putnam's 2000 study, Bowling Alone, was one of the first to identify loneliness as an epidemic, highlighting how decreased participation in civic life and community groups was weakening social bonds in the United States. People be broke, I don't know what to tell you. 2010, a systematic review and meta-analysis by Holt, Lundstadt, Smith, and Layton stated that the modern way of life in industrialized counties, quote, is greatly reducing the quality of social relationships, partly due to people no longer living in close proximity with their extended families. The review notes that from 1990 to 2010, the number of Americans reporting no close confidants had tripled. A number of studies were published shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic by academics such as Claude S. Fisher and Eric Kleinenberg. While it wasn't always clear to all scholars that loneliness was an, quote, epidemic, these studies did conclude that loneliness is indeed a serious issue, having a severe health impact on millions of people. Yes, loneliness is a big deal when it comes to you got your Maslow's, or was it Maslow? Marlowe? The hierarchy of needs. It's been a while since I looked over my psychology notes. But the hierarchy of needs, in order to reach self-actualization, in order to reach comfortability in oneself and one's life, one of the key factors is to have relationships with other people. We're community animals. No matter what rampant American individualism tries to tell you and the rest of us, we are community animals. We have always been community animals. That is how we have survived so long, because we're not particularly good at anything as mammals. We're not the best at seeing, we're not the best at hearing, we're not the best at running, we're not the best at lifting anything, we're pretty fucking small and squishy. We die in extreme temperatures ranging from high to low. We're just not very good at anything, but two things that we are very good at is persistence hunting, because we have stamina out the ass, and also our brains evolved in the way that they did. Whether or not that was a good thing is up for debate, but one of the things that, we evolved to do was to rely on one another, which carried us through some of the worst things to happen to the Earth, and will continue to bolster our survival for eons to come, as long as we don't nuke ourselves into oblivion or completely destroy the planet, or aliens finally decide to come and say, hey, we've been watching you and this is fucked, we're taking this. In early 2021, shortly after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Harvard's Making Caring Common project released its first Loneliness in America report, which linked the crisis to pandemic-driven isolation and identified significant loneliness, particularly among young adults and parents of young children. That same year, Richard Weisbord's follow-up study found that around 36% of American adults reported chronic loneliness, a trend mirrored across several countries where lockdowns and social distancing intensified social isolation. If there's too many consonants altogether, my Connecticut accent starts tripping me up a little bit, so I apologize. In Europe, a comparative overview of the prevalence and determinants of loneliness and social isolation in the pre-COVID period was conducted by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. The findings indicated that 8.6% of the adult population in Europe experienced frequent loneliness and 20.8% experienced social isolation, with Eastern Europe recording the highest prevalence of both phenomena. In Australia, the annual National Household Income and Labour Dynamics in Australia, HILDA survey, has reported a steady 8% rise in agreement with the statement, I often feel very lonely, between 2009 and 2021. Responses indicating strongly agree rose steadily by over 20% in that same time period. This is a reversal of the trend seen from the start of the survey in 2001 until 2009, where these figures had both been steadily decreasing. Together, these studies have spurred more recent efforts to examine and address loneliness as a public health priority in the US and globally. Here we are getting into causes. Some authors have identified individualism as a root cause of loneliness in Western societies, particularly in the U.S., scholars like Robert N. Bella in Habits of the Heart argue that American individualism weakens communal bonds, leading to social isolation and loneliness. Like I have said before, things that can be solved by my political agenda, but we're not getting into that. Where was I? Here I am. Similarly, Wendell Berry's essays emphasize how modern, profit-oriented social structures undermine community connection. Technology use is another significant factor. According to Capita, an American think tank that specializes in the study of loneliness, the overuse of digital and social media, especially among young people, often reduces real-life interactions and deepens feelings of isolation. Yeah, you have to kind of be with other people physically for your body, your brain, to really... having a little bit of interaction through the internet is good. It's better than having absolutely nothing, but we need to physically be around other people or our mental health suffers. it is quite unfortunate for somebody like me who is not a fan of people, is often a loner, likes to spend most of their time alone, that's probably the trauma, that usually I do find myself occasionally feeling that way, but usually my social needs are met by being around the people that I live with, being around the people that come to visit. That's usually just enough for me. Me going into Walmart, busy-ass Walmart, usually by the time I walk out of there, I am so peopled out that I just want to either burn the building down or go to bed. So, let's continue where we were at. Another essay titled The Good, the Bad, and the Lonely, Capita highlighted that Gen Z experiences heightened loneliness as they report lower engagement in community activities. Richard Weisbord's research supports these findings, linking social media and screen time to disconnection among U.S. youth. Hey, this next part is going to prove what I said when I said people be broke. And that's part of the problem. Economic challenges were also found to compound these issues. Low-wage workers and individuals in economically distressed areas experience higher levels of loneliness due to limited social mobility and access to community resources. Chris Arnade's book, Dignity, describes how economic inequality isolates individuals, especially in lower-income communities. Yeah, you can't go out with your friends when you have no money. You can't go out with your friends when your friends don't have any money. Everybody's broke. Everybody in the United States is working to survive. And most of the time that's barely cutting it. So how do we fix this without first fixing the Western problem that we have here, the Western society problem, the rampant individualism and the bootstraps thing, which, by the way, the bootstraps thing was supposed to be an impossible, you say that to mean an impossible task, because pulling yourself up by one's bootstraps is impossible. But we've changed it to mean, just get up and dust yourself off and quit complaining, pores. Anyway, meanwhile, a 2021 survey on the impact of parenthood on loneliness indicates that although parents report slightly more social support than non-parents, single-person households and low social support environments face increased isolation risks. Timothy P. Carney's Family Unfriendly highlights policies that fail to support stay-at-home parents, contributing to isolation and mental health challenges. So, the global response to the loneliness epidemic, we've got only the United States here, so let's continue. Since the 2010s, large-scale initiatives have been launched in countries including the US, Australia, and the UK. In November 2023, the World Health Organization declared loneliness a global public health concern and launched an international commission to study the problem. A little too late, my guys. You should have started that like a decade ago. In the U.S., the loneliness epidemic has increasingly become a topic of public debate, particularly since May 2023, when the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, not Murphy, published a United States Department of Health and Human Services advisory on the impact of the epidemic of loneliness and isolation. The report outlined the health risks of loneliness, including heart disease, stroke, and dementia, and likened the dangers of loneliness to other public health threats such as smoking and obesity. Following Murthy's advisory, bipartisan legislative proposals emerged, notably the National Strategy for Social Connection Act, led by Senator Chris Murphy, Connecticut's own. This proposed act aims to establish a federal office focused on addressing loneliness and promoting social connectedness through community and public health initiatives. Guaranteed. I can look this up. Guaranteed. And it's either dead in the water or struck down, because that was when? Following that was 2023? Yeah. Either it sat there in bill hell, or it's shot down because, God's forbid we fucking care about other people. Anyway, the conversation around loneliness has since broadened to include state-level responses and greater public awareness, understanding the need for systemic efforts to counteract this public health challenge. In September 2024, the New York Times reported the metrics indicative of loneliness were especially common among Americans who lack a college degree. You're gonna find a lot of the, those are the, ding ding do, I don't need no college degree to turn you into communists there, that most of them also claim to be lonely and that they hate everyone and themselves and all that shit because, the lack of education. The next thing we're going to look at is a thing called the male loneliness epidemic. It is a article from 2023 from Western Oregon University, from their little thing called the Western Howl. Written by Cami Ansley. Warning up top, because this gives a warning up top, they do talk about suicide. On May 3rd, United States Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy warned the public about our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Within the past year, a focus has shifted to the loneliness faced by men, coining the argument that a male loneliness epidemic, quote-unquote, has arisen. Despite what the name may suggest, the loneliness attributed to this epidemic is not solely limited to romantic relationships. For one, research conducted in 2021 found that 15% of men claim they have no close friends, a staggering 12% increase since 1990. A study published by Equimundo in 2023 found that a majority of men, ranging from older millennial to Gen Z, agree to the statement, "No one really knows me well," with Generation Z having the highest percentage of agreement among all respondents. I mean, I don't have a lot of people who really know me well. I have select people who know me well. That's the trauma. In the same publication, a majority of men stated that they only have one or two close friends in their area that they feel they can confide in outside of their family. Most men will tell you that they don't really confide in anyone when it comes to the super duper serious shit. Even in the year of 2025, we think we have progressed so much, but men are still largely emotionally stunted because of how they were raised. In the realm of romantic relationships, men are more likely to be single and have less sex than women. A 2022 Pew Research Center survey found that 6 in 10 men under the age of 30 are single, nearly double the rate of women at the time. The Equimundo study found that roughly 1 in 5 men are either not looking for a relationship or are unable to find sexual partners. These statistics about loneliness have been connected to poor mental and physical health. Specifically, greater risk of premature death, cardiovascular illness, anxiety, dementia, depression, and stroke have all been associated with loneliness. 40% of the men surveyed in the Equimundo study had met the screening standards for depressive symptoms, while 44% had experienced suicidal ideation within the last 2 weeks. That was all. That was the trigger warning, guys. Look, I appreciate trigger warnings. I do. I really do. Because if there's like a video of somebody screaming at their kid, I can't watch it. I will have a full PTSD anxiety attack. But just mentioning that's like in a clinical sort of way, like a statistical sort of, like, guys, come on, so I harden up a little. In addition, men are nearly 4 times more likely than women to commit suicide, accounting for nearly 80% of all suicides, despite them making up only 50% of the population. In fact, the U.S. male suicide rate reached its peak of 14.3 per 100,000 men in 2022. How do you count 0.3 of a suicide? What's 0.3 of a suicide? I'm just asking, what is point? Statistics are silly. In light of the emergence and popularization of the male loneliness epidemic, there has been discourse regarding its legitimacy, specifically in regards to the exclusive focus on men when it comes to discussing the general loneliness epidemic. Disparities in loneliness have been found to age, race, financial status, sexuality, and disability, but according to some critics, not for gender. The measurement of loneliness, as well as the interpretation of select studies and statistics, has also been cited as reasons for skepticism. Regardless of its specificity to the male population or not, Dr. Vivek Murthy's publication about the epidemic of loneliness has been acknowledged as a cause for concern. This was obviously just kind of a think piece, a real short situation, so it went in a little. But that was the general conversation around it in 2023. So we've got this from the Medium. Untangling the male loneliness epidemic. Is there an epidemic of male loneliness? I've been seeing posts alluding to it everywhere lately. Google it and you'll find lots of supporting surveys, though they don't tell a clear story. A 2021 survey revealed that men have on average 50% fewer close relationships than women, and the number of close male friendships has plummeted over the last 20 years. Scott Galloway, podcast host, marketing professor, and masculinity pundit, writes on Medium about the crisis of underemployment and under-socialization young men are facing. Slightly more men than women, 57% to 54%, under the age of 24 live with their parents today. Men under 30 are more likely to be single than women, maybe because women are dating above their age bracket. A third of men haven't had sex in the last year. Galloway has promoted this stat, but in truth, everyone is having less sex than they did a decade ago. Men, women, old, young, everyone. At the same time, research is pretty clear that we're all lonelier today than we were a decade ago. A Gallup survey last year discovered that men and women are equally lonely. Eileen Graham, Associate Professor of Social Sciences at Northwestern University, analyzed 9 longitudinal studies of loneliness and found that women self-report being lonely more than men. To me, the conversation around a so-called male loneliness epidemic conflates multiple things. Self-reported loneliness, a subjective experience equally felt across all genders, singledom, which is not the same thing as loneliness, and celibacy, also not the same thing as loneliness. What the conversation about men seem to overlook is the fact that everyone, no matter how old you are or how you identify, is more isolated than they were a decade ago. It's not just a male loneliness epidemic, it's a retiree loneliness epidemic, a queer loneliness epidemic, and everyone is staring at their phones on the couch epidemic. To unisolate ourselves, we have to become more aware of who we are when we're online. I like Richa Kalpadte's line in a beautiful essay about this. I sincerely tried and still try to close the gap between my online and offline lives. Let's see how long this essay is, because that does sound interesting. I'm a bit of an essayist myself. Hoo hoo ha ha hee hee. TLDR. Okay, so with that all set up, basically what it is that we have an overall loneliness epidemic, and what the male loneliness epidemic, quote-unquote, is conflating with loneliness is being horny. Or being without a relationship, which is not the same thing as being lonely overall. Those things can cause loneliness, but they're not the same thing. So what I'm going to talk about now is in regards to a particular set of individuals that we refer to as incels. In short, incel starts for involuntarily celibate and was first coined by a woman, I believe in the 70s, who had written something about having become involuntarily celibate. Now the thing is that most of the people who would actually call themselves an incel are not involuntarily celibate. Their personality is doing it for them. They either have nothing to show for themselves, no job, no prospects, no schooling, no nothing going on, barely making rent if they're not living at their parents' place. Or, we'll say they've also succumbed to particular toxic areas of the internet that fill their heads with weird shit having to do with everything being women's fault because reasons. Or they need to beef themselves up to be some kind of, I don't know, Chad or some kind of... I'm sure the shit's changed as far as terminology is concerned over the years, that I stopped giving a single fuck about incels a very long time ago. But they're not involuntarily celibate. They're not. They're doing it to themselves. For real. Like, have you ever met one of these fucking jack-offs? I've met people like them. And they're usually some of the weirdest, creepiest little fucks. They usually just need to get some fucking therapy and some idea of what boundaries are. They've usually been ostracized for being weird, creepy little fucks, and that's the reason why they're involuntarily celibate, as they like to say. We also have the problem of the male loneliness epidemic. Again, there is no male loneliness epidemic. There is an overall loneliness epidemic, but what men on the internet refer to as the male loneliness epidemic isn't real. It's just them being lonely because they've pushed everybody out of their lives, including any sort of prospect of a romantic relationship, because they are absolute sacks of shit. They're some of either the most boring or most absolutely outrageously sexist motherfuckers you have ever met on the planet. There's nothing to them but loserdom and hate. We have a loser piss baby epidemic is what we have. We do have a loneliness epidemic. Everybody overall is feeling that. And there's plenty of things that we could do to fix that, but a lot of those things the American public won't swallow because socialism is a dirty word. What we need to do is to put into place things to make community easier for individuals, to make it easier for us to come together and be together. But the problem with that is, and we're going to get a little bit into the tinfoil hattery of it, so I'm going to put on the tinfoil hat. This is conspiracy. I think, honestly, here in the United States, that there is a concerted effort to keep us as individualistic as possible. so that they can continue working us into the absolute ground, and that we never, ever organize together and rise up to better our fucking lives. Because the United States is a business, and it doesn't make money unless the rabble are poor and working constantly. So if we were to do anything to alleviate this loneliness that people overall are feeling, and it's not just the United States, but specifically here in the United States, that'd be bad for business. They won't let it happen. But if we were to do it, that we would start seeing some of that loneliness taper off a bit. Some of the problems that we have is with social media and people kind of using that as a filler for meaningful relationships with other human beings, which like I said, unfortunately, as somebody who's very much a loner themselves, I've had to bite the bullet before. In just we're community animals. We need one another. We have to. It's beneficial to our mental health, and from what I just read, apparently also our physical health. I'm not going to try to extrapolate anything from an incomplete data set here. Like, we've got... And besides, I'm gonna start going off on wild tangents if I let myself. That's the ADHD, friends. But overall, like I said, we don't have a male loneliness epidemic. We have a loneliness epidemic. Everyone overall is lonely. So what do? We all have to come together and kind of fix that, right? Well, how do we do that when our own economic system does not allow for that? And now I don't want to get into politics, because that will be here all goddamn day, and you all know where I stand. I am so far left. I am the leftist left that there is without being a full-blown communist. So I'm sure you kind of understand where I sit on that. And capitalism it needs to have the serf class. It needs to have a lower class in order to function. And what we're finding is that lower class divide, like, between the higher and lower class, we had the problem of the middle class shrinking prior. Now I can tell you, it certainly does not, it doesn't exist. You're either poor or you're not these days. And that's not just us in the United States, but I do see that as like there's a large disparity between poor and not in the United States. Overall, worse in some areas. Here in Connecticut, I can tell you that the income inequality between the lowest and the highest is fucking ridiculous. We have places like Bridgeport, which just look up Bridgeport, Connecticut. It was like the murder capital of New England for a while. And a lot of that is because it used to be an old factory town that when those businesses stopped being, like, they started being obsolete because of stuff like, for instance, something like what my parents were in, like printing, which was a person working a machine, became computerized. Like, a lot of stuff moved out of Bridgeport. There was a lot of industrialization stuff that was there that moved out or became obsolete, and now it's just poor and broken down. And there's just a bunch of poor, broken down people living there. And then you go to something like Avon, or Simsbury, or wherever it is that, Stanford? Is it Stanford, Connecticut? Wherever it is that the WWE headquarters is at. Places like that, those people either have, like, old money, like, passed over generational wealth kind of shit, or big stupid jobs, big stupid ties, and big stupid offices. so they have money. So they live in places like Avon, or Simsbury, or Darien, or Greenwich, which is spelled Greenwich if you want to Google that one. Like sandwich, but green. So trying to address an issue like this while under an economic system like capitalism that requires for an entire lower class to exist, but here in the United States, that divide of the lower class, between being poor or not is becoming bigger, and where poor is becoming more and more individuals underneath that descriptor. How do you fix shit like that? You can't put anything anywhere for people to simply enjoy without spending money. You can't do that in the United States. It has to make money or it can't fucking exist. It can't thrive. It can't survive. Unless it's owned by the state or the town or whatever, like a public park or something like that, and even then, that requires revenue of some sort. And if they don't have the state funds for it, or the town funds for it, then they suffer. Even going to like the YMCA and joining like an adult basketball class or something like that still costs money that people overall don't really fucking have, and it's only going to get worse under the current administration. So trying to address something like this overall, the loneliness epidemic, is kind of a Sisyphean task, an uphill battle, if you will. The French philosopher once said one must imagine Sisyphus happy, in order to keep ourselves kind of from going nuts over Sisyphean tasks. I ask, however, when it comes to Sisyphean tasks, okay, Camus, whatever, bro, who does your fucking laundry, you French fuck? Like, as laundry is a Sisyphean task, it is never over. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I can tell you, from my study in psychology and what schooling I do have, is that, yeah, no, it's real bad. It's real bad. For everyone, overall. The male loneliness epidemic is not real. The loneliness epidemic is. The male loneliness epidemic, colloquially, as it is called, is just a group of crying piss baby little boys on the internet whose personalities have pushed everyone away from them and separated them, ostracized themselves from being able to have any sort of romantic relationships or any sort of meaningful relationships. And instead of having any sort of introspection, they blame other people for it. They blame everybody else. It's these people's fault. It's the women, it's the gays, it's the blacks, it's the queers, it's everybody. It's fucking everybody but them. And if that just isn't like a man, that's, not all. Yes, hashtag not all. But a good portion of the men that I have known in my life, even with millennials and Gen Z being a little bit more in tune with their emotions and stuff and going to therapy a little more readily, you still got a lot of dudes who would rather just kind of push it all down and not cope with any of it and not go to therapy and not fix their shit and just blame everybody else for their shit and then drop dead of a heart attack at 45. They'd rather do that than fix their shit. They'd rather whine and cry and piss all over the fucking internet instead of actually doing something about it. There is the difference between the overall loneliness epidemic, which is a very real thing, which is a problem for everyone, and the male loneliness epidemic, quote-unquote, which is a colloquial term for a piss baby epidemic. So, in conclusion, we're kind of fucked. I don't know what we're gonna do about this, man. I don't know what we do about a loneliness epidemic that has been a overall thing on the loneliness epidemic, which again is a very real thing. And I don't know what we're going to do about it, because our economic system is kind of set up, and our, the general culture of the United States is kind of set up to ensure that our populace overall is lonely, and the internet has exacerbated it, especially with social media and the social validation feedback loop. I think that's what it was called. Which plays on your dopamine, which, if that isn't just some of the evilest shit. When I first read that, oh my god, that isn't just some of the evilest shit. Designing websites to psychologically manipulate you into needing to be on those websites. Fuck me. So we have that. What are we going to do about the male loneliness epidemic? Tell those little crybabies to fucking cry more. To fucking climb down off the cross, build a bridge, and get over it. Because it's their fault. It's their fault. They have no introspection. They have no self-awareness. They're usually just some of the absolute rudest, disgusting fucking people. And then you look under the surface, and they're usually sexist, usually racist, usually, this, that, or the other. Usually something fucked up with them and their ideology, which causes more people to be pushed away. Especially in this year, 2025, you're not gonna find, a self-loathing bitch who's gonna, if you do, as one of those men who thinks they're an incel or think they're, have some sort of specifically male loneliness epidemic problem, you want the bottom of the barrel? You want the self-hating chick, the one that, with the internalized misogyny, who wants to, like, yes, sir, oh my goodness, my husband, I cook for him, I clean for him, I pop out his kids, and I do a 40-hour work week, and I'm so blessed. Like, fucking trad wife shit. You want that? You want that. Because that's the bitch that's gonna snap and kill you with, like, nicotine sulfate in your coffee when you're 20 years later. Like, she's gonna snap. If you want quality relationships, you have to be a quality individual. There has to be something about you that has something to offer. And if you have nothing to offer but a shitty personality and a shitty ideology, then either you're just going to attract more shitty people who you're going to have to eventually get rid of and then get up on the internet complaining about how they were shitty and how, even though you probably should have seen that coming because they've been shitty to everybody else, or you're going to attract no one into your life, because people aren't going to put up with that shit. Now that I have talked way too long, that is that. That's it. That's all I wanted to talk about. It's because it came up a little bit on my TikTok feed about dudes, like, whinging about it again on the internet, and, like, all I have to say is just, again, come down off the cross, build a bridge, and get over it. Try being less of a loser piss baby, and maybe you'll find some quality relationships with other individuals. As far as the overall loneliness pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, because pandemic would be more of a global thing, because this is a global issue. I don't know why they call it epidemic. The overall loneliness issue, I don't know if we could ever do anything about that whilst under capitalism. As far as I am concerned, though my opinion on that is quite colored by my own ideology. And I do very much recognize that. That's about it. Oh no, let me do a Charlie. That's about it. So yeah. I'm recording this on my phone, so I don't know how good the audio quality is gonna be. I'll run it through Audacity to try to clean up, but if you want to know what New England culture is, it's 7 a.m. and I'm already fucking annoyed. I have beef with Myers-Briggs, but mainly it's pseudoscience in a general sense. I can tell you that I am not an atheist. I used to be. I am not now. But what for me comes first is empirical evidence, science, things that can be proven, and any sort of religiousness or anything like that comes secondary. And in particular, one of my very first hyper-focuses, very first special interests, as a young person, starting from middle school, I've had an interest in psychology. Now, what I know about the Myers-Briggs test is that it is playing off of the Jungian idea, from what I can parse, at the very least. All I know is that personality, in a general sense, is full of nuance, and there's, the argument of nature versus nurture, which is an argument still we don't have any concrete idea on what a lot of things are. We have the idea of epigenetics, which, whether or not that can shape personality, we have, in neuroscience, we have, neurodivergent brains. The reason why I call them neurodivergent is because they are wired differently, either from the get-go or through trauma. For instance, things like borderline personality disorder and PTSD are considered neurodivergencies. It's basically just anything that is divergent from what we would call a normally healthy, functioning brain and psyche. The internet co-opted a little bit to being just ADHD and autism. That's not what it means broadly. But, the internet is dumb. But I was watching something early ass here in the morning, and of course, already annoyed, and it was just a mild passing mention. I watch a couple of different podcast type things. One of them has Markiplier. And they were talking about, they did an episode where they did the Myers-Briggs test and talking about how it's kind of bullshit and it does change depending on the test. There's a few different ones. The 16 personalities one is the one most people are the most familiar with. So I'm gonna pause recording right now, and then I'm going to take 3 different tests. I'll post the results with the audio. I'm not gonna try to grab video for this. And I'll pause recording here, we'll see what we get. Alright, I unintentionally lied. I found out that one of the tests wanted you to pay money, and I don't have throw money in an idiot test kind of money, so. For the 16 personalities, I got what I usually get, which is INTP-A, known as the Logician. I will read the little blurb. As an INTP, Logician, you possess a unique blend of intellectual curiosity, analytical prowess, and a penchant for abstract thinking. Your mind is a playground of ideas, constantly exploring complex concepts and seeking to understand the underlying principles of the world around you. You approach life with a rational, logical mindset, preferring to rely on facts and reason rather than emotions or conventional wisdom. Your insatiable thirst for knowledge drives you to delve deep into subjects that capture your interest. You're not content with surface-level understanding, instead you strive to grasp the intricacies of systems and theories, often developing innovative solutions to complex problems. This intellectual depth, combined with your ability to think outside the box, sets you apart in both personal and professional spheres. I have ADHD, and all of this is very broad, much like astrology. It's casting a wide net, and yeah, when you do that, you're gonna catch something. What do we got? 72% introverted. I could have told you that. 71% thinking, 72% prospecting, 65% assertive. Yeah, I am definitely more assertive than not. I don't know about intuitive over observant though, but sure. On the other test, which is just humanmetrics.com's Jung typology test, TM, got just INTP, though the numbers here are a little different as far as the percentages. Introverted versus extroverted. Introvert 72 on 16 personalities, 62% on this one. Intuitive is 12% on this one, 61% on the 16 personalities. Thinking over feeling is at 50%, depending on the situation, for human metrics, but way more into thinking at 71% on 16 personalities, got 12 on human metrics. So judging prospecting is perceiving over judging. It's like preference of perceiving over judging. And it doesn't have the assertive or turbulent. It says you're likely self-assured, even-tempered, and resistant to stress, refusing to worry too much. Yeah, that's, if I don't do that and be just a silly little guy, then the darkness sets in. That's the trauma. Prospecting, you're likely very adaptable, easygoing, and flexible, prioritizing spontaneity over stability. That's the ADHD. Stability, schedules, they make my skin itch. I can't have plans. Don't ask me to plan anything too far out in advance. My autistic friends can't fucking stand my ass when it comes to planning shit because I wait until the day before to start doing anything like planning. Because I improvise, and that's the ADHD, that's the impulse control. Oh, this is 16 personalities. This is thinking over feeling. You likely focus on objectivity and rationality, putting effectiveness above social harmony. I'm mean. I'm just rude. I just hurt your feelings. Welcome to Connecticut, where the poor people are mad. Like, you want to know what the mad people in New England are like? Just look at fucking Bill Burr. That's not just Boston, that's all of us. That's all poor New Englanders. We are mad. And we're mean. Intuitive over observant, by a slight margin. You're likely very imaginative and open-minded, focusing on hidden meanings and distant possibilities. I'm just, my brain is just, it doesn't stop. That's, yeah, it's the ADHD. You can't personality type, whatever. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, as according to Wikipedia, is a self-report questionnaire that makes pseudoscientific claims to categorize individuals into 16 distinct psychological types or personality types. The MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator,
was constructed during World War II by Americans Catherine Cook Briggs and her daughter Isabel Briggs Myers, inspired by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung's 1921 book Psychological Types. Test assigns a binary value to each of 4 categories, which we went over, and with the letters I received meant. The perceived accuracy of test results relies on the Barnum effect, flattery, and confirmation bias. Barnum effect, also called the Forer effect, or less commonly the Barnum-Forer effect, is a common psychological phenomenon whereas individuals give high accuracy ratings description of their personality traits that supposedly are tailored specifically to them, which are in fact vague and general enough to apply to a broad range of people. This effect can provide a partial explanation for the widespread acceptance of some paranormal beliefs and practices, such as astrology, fortune-telling, aura reading, and some types of personality tests. It was originally called the fallacy of personal validation by psychologist Bertram Forer. Despite controversies over validity, the instrument has demonstrated widespread influence since its adoption by the Educational Testing Service in 1962. It is estimated that 50 million people have taken that test, and there's 10,000 businesses, 2,500 colleges and universities, and 200 government agencies in the United States who use this bunk-ass shit. Like I read briefly, Barnum effect, also called the fallacy of personal validation by Bertram Forer. The term Barnum effect was coined in 1956 by psychologist Paul Meehl in his essay Wanted, a Good Cookbook, because he relates the vague personality descriptions used in certain pseudo-successful psychological tests to those given by showman P.T. Barnum. In 1948, in what has been described as a classic experiment, psychologist Forer gave a psychology test. His diagnostic interest blank to 39 of his psychology students who were told that they would each receive a brief personality vignette based on their test results. 1 week later, Forer gave each student a purportedly individualized vignette and asked each of them to rate it on how well it applied. In reality, each student received the same vignette consisting of the following items. You have a great need for other people to like and admire you. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. You have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have to not use to your advantage. While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them. Your sexual adjustment has presented problems for you. Disciplined and self-controlled outside, you tend to be worrisome and insecure inside. At times, you have certain serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. You prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. You pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept other statements without satisfactory proof. You found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourself to others. At times you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while other times you are introverted, wary, and reserved. Some of your aspirations tend to be pretty unrealistic. Security is one of your major goals in life. On average, the students rated its accuracy as 5.30 on a scale of 0, very poor, to 5, very to excellent. Only after the ratings were turned in, it was revealed that all students had received an identical vignette assembled by Forer from a newsstand astrology book. Attributed the effect to gullibility. The effect has been said to confirm the Pollyanna principle, where individuals tend to, quote, to use or accept positive words of feedback more frequently than negative words of feedback. So if you just cast a wide net of good-sounding words, yeah, it's going to apply to you because you want to accept it. The Pollyanna principle. Tendency for people to remember pleasant items more accurately than unpleasant ones. Our minds tend to focus on the optimistic, while at a conscious level, it tends to focus on the negative. It's just, the brain is a very complicated thing. We can get into actual personality types, but we've got words such as qualitative and quantitative happening in the first fucking paragraph on Wikipedia, and there's type theories, and then an entire section on Carl Jung, just on Wikipedia, let alone getting into how personality actually fucking works. As far as we have been able to glean, because we've got arguments such as nature versus nurture, and again, that's an argument. We haven't fully come to a conclusion on that one when it comes to personality. So yeah, it's just, pseudoscience makes me mad, and even though I'm not an atheist, I do put science in what can be proven above anything religious or magical in thinking. So when it comes to stuff like astrology, yeah, you know, I'm a June Gemini, Cancer, Moon, Taurus rising. To some people that means something. I think that's just a fun little thing, but if you actually, like, there's people who don't date someone based on astrology signs, and you think to yourself as a rational human being that that can't be a thing. I assure you, my friend, it is. They exist. Those people are fucking out there and they breed. You know, it frustrates me. And if you ever want to know what my life is like, and what living in my head is like, I woke up to feed my cats at like 6 something. I woke up and it takes me a while to wake up and come to grips with fucking existing another day. And then I get up, I feed my cats, I start watching something, and they mention the Myers-Briggs test and how much it's a piece of fucking bullshit. And I just spiraled into being annoyed at 7 o'clock in the morning. So here you go, little bonus rant for you.